Hi everybody, welcome to our next podcast. It's good to have you here and welcome to all the new subscribers. And we were going to do a different podcast today, but considering the fact that Paul Bernardo's been in the news lately, like who would have even thought we would have been hearing about him anymore, but here he is. So we thought we should touch on what's happening. So we thought we'd just do a short one with you today. Before we get started, we still have our giveaway going, so all you have to do is just leave a comment. You can leave it at the bottom of this video, and you will win this official OPP merch. Really good lanyard, really awesome looking baseball cap. So just leave us a comment and we will choose the winner in about a week. We're going to talk about Paul Bernardo, not so much about the entire case. I think we've all either seen it before or it's been brought up again lately. We're going to touch on a few of the key points, but mostly what we're going to talk about is Paul Bernardo in particular and what has been happening recently and legally concerning his move. So take it away.
Okay, so he was born Paul Kenneth Bernardo, August 27th in 1964 in Scarborough, Ontario. His parents were Kenneth and Marilyn Bernardo. He is the youngest of 3 children. So his father was a criminal. He was pretty bad himself. He spent a lot of time in prison, mostly for sexually abusing Paul's oldest sister. He also was charged for voyeurism and other crimes involving children.
So that's really, there you go. Like I don't know if it was a learned behavior from Paul, but that certainly doesn't help.
Could be learned, but also inherited.
Oh.
I guess.
Yeah. Now I was really surprised. This was a point I wasn't sure. I knew he had a horrible father. I didn't realize the extent of it until I looked a little bit deeper, and there we go.
Yeah,
like there's such a connection, and
I wasn't aware of that either.
Yeah. Yikes.
Paul's mother, she suffered from lots of mental health issues, mostly withdrew from even her family because of her depression, and agoraphobia, which is fear of
basically going out in the public. She could not go out in the public, was not good with crowds of people.
Yeah. So she didn't go out a lot, and she ended up just locking herself away in the basement of the home. So Paul, I guess he did the best he could as a child. He was pretty active, and he presented himself as a happy person despite what he was living with at home.
Yeah, so already as a child, I guess he's being the actor already, putting up the good front. So it started early for him.
Yep. He was also a Boy Scout when he was younger, so, I mean, that's pretty good for kids when they're younger. You would hope would do something good for their lives.
Yeah.
But as a youth, I developed pyromaniac inclinations. I was having dark fantasies, some of which involved having, I guess, a harem or a farm of virgins where he could just take his pick whenever he felt like it.
Yeah, he literally said he wanted a virgin farm. So, and that's when he was basically like a teenager, maybe late teens, and this is where his mind's going already, so.
Yeah. So he's already starting to develop some pretty wild sexual ideas.
Yeah.
So when he was 16 years old, his mother told him that he was conceived through an extramarital affair that she had, and that his father was not his father, which would have been pretty damaging too by that age already.
And he's already acting like very unusual. He's super vulnerable. This is not good news on top of all of that.
So I guess it kind of would be learned. It depends if his dad really wasn't his dad. then it's learned behavior and not...
It's learned, yeah. I guess it wouldn't be genetic unless something, like his parents obviously both suffer with mental health issues, so it would be genetically he would definitely have something wrong, It's not to say that all of them did, but it would affect some of the children at least.
Definitely would. So because of this information, Paul was so disgusted with his mom, he used to call her a whore, and she would reciprocate by calling him a bastard from hell.
Yeah, so great. He has no parents, basically.
Yeah.
All in all, he did not have a good start. It's no excuse. And don't ever think, when we're talking about these sort of things that we're trying to sugarcoat anything, or it's just we're very interested in the psychology behind a lot of these people. And, like we always say, common thread, and there is always common thread. And here we go again with Paul Bernardo and the parental issues. He's got it from both sides this time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No, it's not like we're saying poor him. We're just saying, this is the pattern.
Just observing.
And yeah. Really. Yeah. And there's just common patterns amongst all of the serial killers, and same with the cult leaders. It's a thing, so.
So in 1982, he attended the University of Toronto. He worked at Amway, which is a multi-level marketing company started in America, and he started having aspirations to be rich and famous. I guess by this time he already could see how his charming demeanor and his looks were, working for him, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, he was, I guess, somewhat intelligent. I mean, he went to university and everything. He sure knew how to manipulate people, so whatever made him feel good, I think that was the bottom line for Paul Bernardo. It's whatever satisfied him, and that's going to translate into a number of horrible things, but I think that's sort of his frame of mind.
Yeah. So his first live-in girlfriend, she broke up with him, mostly due to his domineering behavior, and in retaliation he decided to set her belongings on fire. So a pretty hateful thing to do.
Yeah, and you'd already mentioned before he was pyromaniac.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course he's going to burn her stuff.
So, he was already known for being violent and unstable in his relationships. In 1986, he was served with 2 restraining orders by women that he had dated after he'd made obscene phone calls to them.
Yeah.
So, doesn't take rejection very well either.
And he does not care about women. He does not care about women, and already at this point, he is already treating women horribly. But it's just like it progresses worse and worse, obviously. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, it was just, he was hardwired, I think, just to not have any respect for women.
Yeah, and I guess it was after, if he was calling his mom a whore, because he's a bastard.
Yeah, instant hate for women.
Yeah.
I guess.
I could see that being definitely something that set him down that path.
Yeah.
So by 1987 in October, he met Karla Homolka. This is when they became the killer couple. Well, eventually.
Yeah,
not right
eventually. Away, no, and she was the one. I think that's why he married her, because he knew she was vulnerable and she would be one that'd be easily swayed and controlled, and yeah. So she was the winner, I guess.
Yeah, well, in some way.
Loser. But we're not going to talk much about Karla. It's mostly about Paul, but now he's starting with Karla, and then everything is going to go downhill fast.
Yeah, so between 1987 and 1990, Paul committed increasingly vicious serial sexual assaults in and around Scarborough. But it wasn't until he was arrested with the murders a little on down the line that he would be charged with those crimes also. So by 1990, Paul had lost his job as an accountant, and he was making money by smuggling cigarettes across the border into the United States. And eventually, he and Karla decided to move into her parents' home. And then in December 1990, Karla and Paul, they drugged, assaulted, and killed Karla's sister Tammy, who was 14 at the time.
And it was right in the parents' home, so they were living there. And it was basically the parents were upstairs sleeping, and this was happening downstairs, so. Yeah.
Yeah, so although it was deemed accidental through an autopsy at the time. So June 29, 1991, Paul and Carla got married in St. Catharines, and they moved into their own home. And it was at this home where Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French were held, assaulted, and killed.
And it was actually on their wedding day where Leslie Mahaffey's body was found that same day. And they still went through with that wedding. Like, it just...
It's baffling, really.
Can you imagine what was going through their heads? And actually, I think they had mentioned that they were watching the police report at their wedding at the bar or something. They were showing that they'd found a body.
Yeah.
So imagine Paul and Carla at the time.
And
Wild.
Yeah, still carried on. But that
Yeah.
was the two murders that he was charged with eventually.
Yeah.
So February 17th, 1993 was when Paul Bernardo was arrested after Carla had turned him in to the police. And when she showed up at the police station, she had 2 black eyes. Apparently he had beat her pretty badly. And this, I guess, was where she finally called it quits and decided to go tell the police about some of his activities that he'd been doing.
Yeah. I mean, really with Carla, she really played a game. She pulled the wool over their eyes. They called the deal with the devil. There were... All of these murders and assaults were recorded. And there were a lot more assaults that were recorded than the public knew. And let's just say the defenses, so Paul's lawyer hid tapes for a long time that he should have disclosed.
And it was crazy, though, that the police didn't even find them.
The police tore their house apart. They finally had permission to go in and just basically tear the place apart, looking for evidence, and they did not find the tapes. But Paul Bernardo let his lawyer know, and he actually drew him like a little diagram, almost like a map. This is where the tapes are, and his lawyer went in with the law clerk and found those tapes and hid them.
They were, of course, very disturbing tapes. A lot of the jurors had to have therapy afterwards for years. Some of them are still dealing with it.
Yeah, it's devastating.
Content.
Devastating.
Yeah.
And actually, the law clerk for the defense counsel is still very disturbed by it. So, but anyway, his lawyer had those tapes and sat on them. But you know what? In the end, he was still convicted. But that was a real miscarriage of the legal system at the time, and that's why it was such a big deal about these tapes.
I believe that was when he had to get a new lawyer because it was, I think he wanted to turn in the tapes, or he wanted to give the tapes to the police, but because he had held them, that would change the case in some way. So he had to bring in a new lawyer who eventually decided to show the police anyways, regardless of what he had to do.
Well, lawyers they have their own government, so that's the Law Society of Ontario. So, and under the rules and laws and regulations of the Law Society of Ontario, and it's just known throughout that you cannot withhold evidence. Each side needs to know everything, always. There's not a lot where you see people having surprise evidence and I think that was Paul's lawyer, the first lawyer's intention was just to, when Carla was testifying against Paul, to just whip out these tapes and say, hey, you're just as guilty as he is. You're a tarnished witness. But he broke laws of the Law Society of Ontario, so I believe you have to pay a membership and you have to be licensed and you have to follow their rules, and he broke a big one, so he was done. So Paul got this new hotshot lawyer who dealt with a lot of crime cases. I think 300 different cases, all murder.
300, yeah. So the time of his crimes went from March 1986 to April 1992. So that's a good 6 years he was going unnoticed, so to speak.
And he was young, too.
Yeah, he was, 26? He was 28 when he got arrested.
Yeah.
So his crimes spanned from 1986 to 1992. In that time, he murdered 3 people, sexually assaulted 14 people, and 6 attempted sexual assaults. And in 1993, when he was convicted, so he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. That's for Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French. 2 counts of kidnapping, 2 counts of forcible confinement, 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault, and committing an indignity to a body, which was encasing Leslie Mahaffey's body in cement blocks.
Yeah, so committing an indignity to a body is basically if they were to chop people up or harm the body in any way. That's what that is, and that's a whole separate charge.
And so his penalty for all his crimes was life imprisonment with a possibility of parole after 25 years. But he was declared a dangerous offender in 1995.
So a couple of years later.
So at first he was imprisoned at Kingston Penitentiary until 2013. Then he was moved to Millhaven Institution from 2013 to 2023. And then what we're talking about today was he was recently moved to La Casa Medium Security Institution this year.
Yep, and this is where the problem lies. And like I said, even we haven't heard about Paul Bernardo in years, maybe a little bit in 2021 when he went for a parole hearing, but mostly unheard of. And then here he is in the news, and it's causing quite a stir. So when he was in Millhaven, he had 2 parole hearings, one in 2018 and one in 2021, and he was denied freedom both times. So now he's in La Casa. He'd already served 29 years in prison as of this year. La Casa is a medium security institution near Mont-Tremblant, Quebec. So Correctional Services Canada doesn't usually comment on moving offenders, but they confirmed that yes, he was moved. But of course, it was after he was moved, not that he was moving. Spokesperson Kevin Inotucci commented, "While we cannot comment on the specific of the offender's case, we assure the public that this offender continues to be incarcerated in a secure institution with appropriate perimeters and controls in place."
Which is rightly so, because if he is a dangerous offender, definitely got to keep him under wraps, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, he's still classified as a dangerous offender, and that will never go away. He also noted that Bernardo is serving an indeterminate sentence, which means that there is no end date to his sentence. There is some variances to that, and I'll mention that shortly. But yeah, there's no end date, but also it doesn't mean that he's going to be incarcerated for the rest of his life. The Quebec and Ontario regional presidents of the Union of Canadian Correctional Officers said that the union was never told of Paul's transfer to the Quebec region. So apparently the union did not know he was being moved out of the province.
Which, that's a bit of a mistake, I guess you could say. I don't know what the reasons were for or why they didn't let them know. But that's definitely something that has got some people up in arms about it.
Well, the Union of Correctional Officers are saying the only thing that they can think is that he's being moved for his safety.
From a maximum security prison?
To a medium security in Quebec. That's the only thing that they can fathom. Otherwise, they're baffled by the whole situation. And they're one of the ones that actually should be in the know and know exactly why he's being moved.
Yeah.
So La Casa itself holds offenders convicted of sex crimes and ones that need institution protection, like sexual abusers. pedophiles, ones that would get beat up or worse in a normal institution general population. I don't think that Paul Bernardo was ever in general population, but maybe he was going to start being incorporated into general population. Maybe, like, they're being very, very secretive as to those points.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, did they try him in general population and it just didn't go over well? Or are they saying, you've served almost 30 years, now you can go into general pop, but considering who you are, and every prisoner in here knows who you are, it might not be in your best interest.
That's true, because isn't that why they moved to, or that's why Carla Homolka moved to Quebec, right? Because she thought people didn't really know about it so much in Quebec?
Oh, it was known. I think it was just much safer for her, and she was put into a particular sort of program where she could change her name and have a new identity, and so I think that's just what it was. They just moved her province over, kind of like witness protection, or...
Yeah.
I mean, she was found anyway. It got out there. So this could be the reason why he was moved to La Casa, considering it offers institution protection against people who are sexual offenders. So it makes perfect sense. It hasn't been confirmed really yet why he was moved, but this sounds pretty plausible, and this is what the Correctional Officers Union are basically saying. This must be the reason. Like, it has to be why. So his move is due to a security classification review, which is conducted every 2 years. So this is what is being assumed right now and what is being put out in the public. So Canada, when it comes to human rights is inclusive of everybody. Whether you're incarcerated or not incarcerated, good or bad, whatever, it doesn't matter. Everyone's human rights are protected. So this is sort of, that influences all areas of law. So even, the worst of the worst, who is incarcerated, which is basically him, still has his rights. And actually, this classification review that they do every 2 years is to risk management, his safety. So this move is all about him, basically, and his safety. And really, it's become a political circus. The politicians are going wild. Prime Minister Trudeau recently is being accused of allowing this move to happen. Ontario Premier Doug Ford had mentioned the prison commissioner should be fired after the secretive transfer of Bernardo. So it doesn't really matter what the politicians say about this move. And it really had nothing to do with Trudeau. Trudeau didn't give the word to move Bernardo. That is, it's an internal decision. It has nothing to do with him. So he can make the changes. He can step in now, and actually so can the premiers of both provinces, of Ontario and Quebec, and sort of step in now. But they don't have the control over it, is the thing. Canada's the prison system is really supposed to be geared toward rehabilitating. Whether you're sort of a low-risk offender or high-risk offender, this is what Canada's justice system is all about. Hopefully taking someone and molding them into a better person where they can be released. Because release, and to a certain extent it doesn't matter what crime it is, release is the end result. So as I said, the Prime Minister and Premiers have not technically played a role in Paul's move. This falls under the jurisdiction of the Correctional Services of Canada. But federal and provincial, territorial governments do share responsibility for correctional services as a whole. So basically passing the laws and overseeing. And as I said, my honest opinion is that they are using this as, the politicians are using this as leverage against each other. It's been a real battle amongst the parties. But a private member's bill might be a positive thing. It could change the structure of inmate transfers, which I think is important. But I feel also, if this was such a concern, now no doubt the Bernardo case sparked it, but if this were such a big concern, would they not have changed that a long time ago? And not just wait until it's Paul Bernardo and it's out in the public.
Yeah, true. Like, it's, I mean, obviously, again, because of the severity of his crimes, it would make sense to change these rules when he's being moved, but really the rules should have been in place to prevent that already.
Yeah, just it seems to me, and I'm not anti-politics, don't get me wrong. I actually try to keep myself in the loop of what's happening, but I feel that they're using it as leverage against each other right now. So the move is currently, as of today, we know this for sure, being investigated by a 3-person committee within the Correctional Service of Canada. And the results should be made public within the next few weeks. So the Correctional Service of Canada has the authority to transfer inmates across the country via voluntary and involuntary processes. So it's, like I said, it's like government within a government and rules within rules, and it's very specific to inmates, but it's not strict. And I think that's probably what's going to come out of this. So what we've been hearing is true. Paul has been transferred for his own safety. And this falls under Section 13 of the Corrections and Conditional Release Regulations. So these are some of the laws. Section 13 in particular deals with emergency transfers, which I think probably this is what it was an emergency transfer. So it's in the Canadian government guidelines for inmate transfer. So subsection of that, when it is determined it is necessary to immediately transfer an inmate, a case conference between institution staff will take place prior to the inmate's transfer. So again, this is an inter-institutional decision. They met with each other first. Whatever the cause of it was has not been put out there, but before he was transferred, they would have met. After they met and decided that he had to be moved, the head of the institution will meet with the inmate, or the inmate and his lawyer, and say, okay, you have to be moved and this is why. So obviously Paul was agreeable to it. Something must have happened, and that will eventually come out, and it's going to be very interesting.
I wonder if it would have something to do with maybe like someone who is involved, or there's a personal connection between them and the victim, maybe, or they got brought in, so they were just kind of like, "Oop, better move him."
Well, it could be something like that. I know that happens with a lot of like organized crime kind of scenarios. If somebody's there and somebody, like an opposing whatever, comes in, then they have to move somebody, or it's, yeah, I mean, there's so many things.
Yeah.
We hopefully will get the truth.
Hopefully.
That remains to be seen. Whatever they tell us is what they tell us, but we'll see if they actually tell us the truth about it. If this is the case, emergency transfers can be for a short period of time. So it doesn't mean because he's transferred to medium security that he's going to stay in medium security. It's probably seeming that it's sort of leading to him being released. That doesn't mean that at this point. It just means that they had to get him out of there right away, and it's more like they're sort of holding him here. Most likely that's the case. And it's possible that he'll be transferred to another maximum security.
Well, I mean, hopefully it's... I mean, they would know beforehand, though, wouldn't they? Whether it's a temporary one or...
I guess
they didn't say much anyway, so...
They're not saying much about anything.
Yeah.
Right now. And it's being investigated by committee, so they're definitely not going to say very much right now at all, because it's under the microscope. So we're going to know very little at the moment. Kevin Anatucci, spokesperson for the Correctional Service, confirmed that the victims' families were informed of the move on the day it happened. So at first we thought they weren't told at all until much later, or a day later, but they were told on the day, which still doesn't seem right.
But what could they do, though, if they told them beforehand if they had a problem? I guess, petition probably, but...
It's probably nothing they could do. If this is the case where it's for Bernardo's protection, the family can definitely protest against it and speak against it, and I believe they are doing that. But it's sort of up to the correctional facility to say, the reason we're doing it is because he's going to be whatever, something's going to happen to him, or he's a threat to somebody else. And yes, they were told the morning he was moved. There's speculations that the victims' families' lawyers had received telephone calls and emails from correctional services prior to the day. This would have been in regards to the transfer, but the lawyers did not contact them back. So they were left messages, call us, and apparently lawyers didn't contact them. I doubt it. It's probably just so correctional services can just explain why the families didn't know until that morning. Maybe could be an excuse, I don't know.
Yeah.
Mr. Rienere, as far as we know, as far as what they've released to the public, the move was to protect him. And his rights are protected under the cloak of the Federal Privacy Act. The service has acknowledged that while Canadians want answers about why Bernardo was moved, it is restricted by law on what it can say and cannot say.
Similar to when he was, when his trial was happening and they had that media ban too, right? It was certain times you can't put the information out there.
Yeah. But again, because it's under investigation, they're not going to say very much right now.
Yeah.
So he is now 58 years old, and his status is in limbo. As far as we're concerned, anyway. I just wanted to add that just because he is in a secure custody at the moment, and this is going back to something that we mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean that one day he may not be released. So inmates that have received many, many more convictions than Paul have been released from prison after 30 plus years time served. So
life sentence in Canada is 25 years, right?
Yeah, to life. But if you serve the 25 plus years, and it seems to hover around the 30-year mark, after that, you can be eligible for parole and probation or whatnot. It's sort of this 30-year mark that sort of determines everything.
Yeah.
And while dangerous offender status is indeed the most stringent, it too is no barrier to an offender eventually getting out of prison. So even though he's labeled a dangerous offender, he could still get out. So even that may not stop that from happening. So I'm just bringing it up because it's always a possibility. Considering we don't know much right now, it's just speculation all over the place. So, but that is actually a thing. I just thought I would add that there, because it could also go that direction.
I mean, it would be. I mean, if he finally got out, and people are obviously worried about it with good reason. I mean, there's no way they wouldn't keep him under wraps. Like a guy like him, even if they do set him free, I would think they'd have an eye on him. Like, you can't just keep him on a register and just be like, okay, off you go.
Yeah, well, it's the thing is he would almost have to change his look. It would have to be so extreme, because where is Paul Bernardo going to go that he's not going to be recognized, or somebody's going to leak, hey, they moved him to Calgary, or hey, he's in Hawaii, you know what I mean? Like,
He does look pretty different these days, but I think Canadians would definitely recognize him right away.
Under the Criminal Code of Canada, dangerous offender status is meant to protect the public from offenders who are a threat to the life, safety, or physical or mental well-being of other persons, and it imposes an indeterminate incarceration period. So this is also pretty important when considering Paul Bernardo's case. Dangerous offender status is not permanent. Although the label can still be there, they can take away the barrier of it. So you'll still be on lists, but it won't be a barrier. It's subject to review every 2 years, and even then, dangerous offenders are still eligible for parole. The release of court-designated dangerous offenders is quite common in Canada. The high-profile nature of his crimes has prompted the Correctional Service of Canada to be very guarded about any notion that he may regain his freedom. So they don't want anyone to take that and run with it. That's not what it means, is what they're saying.
Yeah.
So they don't want anyone to just, it's not that. Just yet. But with other less prominent serial killers, they have been open about the fact that eventual release is the ultimate goal for any offender in a Canadian prison. So they don't want you saying it about Paul Bernardo. But other offenders, yes, they were completely honest. But I think it would just be, if he does get released and the public is known or has been told about it, I think all hell's going to go wild.
Yeah.
I don't think Canadians are going to put up with this.
Definitely be an uproar.
Yeah, and he will be in danger. He'll be in danger. And I'm not even sure how much of a life he could have anyway. How would he work? How would he, he doesn't even deserve it.
No, definitely not.
But I mean, I'm not going to say unfortunately human rights are protected, because it's a very, very important system and right to have your human rights protected, but gotta wonder about, does he really deserve that? He's a human being like we are, but
well, after what he did to those people that he took their lives at such a young age.
Yeah, it's just these young girls, And
after what he did to them too, it's definitely not high priority to consider his feelings or life.
No, and it's sad you have to think that way about somebody, but he definitely deserves it. Because I believe in, I'm a big believer that we're all humans on the planet just trying to make it, kind of thing. I don't discriminate. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I think we're all the same. But there are some people that are exceptions to the rule. And really, he shouldn't see the light of day. But we'll see. Now, it's sparking a lot of political talk right now. So let's see how the laws hold out. Canadian prison system is considered to be a broken institution. It's a rehabilitation system that oftentimes doesn't work, as according to stats, 40% of released inmates will return to prison within 2 years. So they have this sort of rehabilitation, but they're not actually rehabilitating.
Yeah, they're just not built like everyone else.
Yeah, it's just like they're just going through the motions with these inmates.
Yeah.
Cycle them in, cycle them out. Rehabilitation team with strict human right considerations could allow Paul Bernardo to be released. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a chance of parole after 25 years. He has fulfilled the 25-year requirement to access parole hearings, which we talked about earlier, and he was denied. But although he has been denied parole, he is at that fine line. So to life means an inmate would have to spend the rest of their natural life in prison unless paroled, pardoned, or otherwise commuted to a fixed term. So we're going to have to watch and see what happens. We're right in the midst of it now, all of us, and we have no information, just little bits and pieces of what they're giving us, but just sort of looking at it, myself, I'm seeing that, again, this was all about his safety. And we'll find out what happens next, where he ends up. It's getting rough. It's getting really, really rough. And I think what's going to come out of this, it's going to be precedent setting. I think there's going to be some laws being changed. Again, the politicians are sort of using this against each other. We'll see. That's going to go somewhere. I don't know where, but hopefully they just work together in the end, because we have to. We have to with this guy.
It's got to be something done about it. Like, again, if he was just a petty criminal or something, it wouldn't matter. But the types of things that he did were pretty horrific. So I don't think anyone's happy to have him around.
No.
And he's just not. I mean, I don't know. He's been in prison for 30 years.
Pretty much 30 years, yeah. And we don't know. Like, you don't hear anything about him. He's just in prison, and that's good, you know? Yeah, so I think another thing that's going to really, really change is they're going to have a big overall look at the entire prison system and particular transfers. And I can see some big changes being made with this. But I think they got to remember to not lose focus on him. It's not all about, I mean, private members' bills are great, and it's going to help. And if some of these laws can be changed, great. But they can't lose focus on what is the core here, and that is, he's basically in limbo right now. He's in a medium security. We don't know how long he's going to be there. We don't know if he's on his way to being let out, because as I mentioned, it's always possible. He has done basically his 25 years. Yeah. Now we're in the to life part. So whether he's been good, I don't know. Even if he is, they can only tell us so much about him anyway, because his rights are protected. His privacy is protected. So we'll never know. Although we would love to know, like, I don't know that they can. And if the route they're going is to release him within the next 10 years, you got to make sure the public is okay with it. I know it's his right to be released, but it's also our right to feel safe.
Yeah, he robbed a few people of their own rights. So again, like, it's hard to say, because he does have rights, but at the same time,
so do we.
Yeah, so do we, and he doesn't really deserve them.
No.
Honestly.
But anyway, we will keep an eye on this. Everybody keep an eye on this. We'll see what kind of information they give us in the next little while. And maybe we'll revisit it, or even just touch on it a little bit, maybe in the next few podcasts if anything new comes up. But anyway, that is the story of what is happening now with Paul Bernardo. I'm still shocked to hear this guy in the news. I was around, like, when I was a teenager, that's when all of these things were happening. So I was the same age as these young girls that he killed. And it was a very, very scary time. It was a scary time, and it's almost triggering. So I can understand where people are getting a little bit worried and confused. But that's what we know so far anyway. And it's basically, you can check out, you can Google it and see what's been happening. I'm keeping an eye on more the legal end of it and seeing what's happening there. And we'll let you know if we hear anything new. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And you guys take care, and we'll see you in the next one.
Be good.
Bye now.
Bye.